During the Qin dynasty in 200 BC, Emperor Shi banned religion and ordered the burning of all philosophical and religious works. Confucian scholars hid their texts, while people would worship their gods in secret and were no longer allowed to wear anything perceived as religious. The people of China were subjected to harsh penalties for breaking even the smallest of laws. Emperor Shi outlawed all books which did not deal with his family line or his dynasty, even though he was himself obsessed with immortality and the afterlife. While his citizens were persecuted, his private library was full of books on these subjects. In 2021, an emperor who goes by the same name has imprisoned over 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps, where they are fed communist propaganda day and night. The men are required to shave their beards, and in order to be released, prisoners must eat pork and desecrate copies of the Quran. The Chinese Communist Party is officially atheist, yet at the same time, the party claims to adhere to the constitution, which contains provisions for the freedom of religion. Chinese rulers have conquered new lands, not by the Confucian teachings of benevolence and harmony, but by terror and deceit. The Chinese Communist Party claims these lands were part of ancient China. But how big and influential was ancient China in reality? How long will the world turn a blind eye to the CCP's aggressive land grabs in the name of historical legitimacy? Does India have a stronger case than China for Xinjiang and Tibet? Let's find out. I am Laksh, and welcome to The Broken Concept, your daily dose of geopolitics. Both historically and civilisationally, India's claims over Xinjiang are far greater and more credible than those of China. In the 3rd century AD, Kumarajiva, an Indian monk from Kashmir, crossed the Pamir Mountains and arrived in Kucha, where he became the royal priest. The king's sister Jiva married him, and she gave birth to a child called Kumarajiva. Kumarajiva's story is a stark reminder that India did not shrink in 1947 alone. It has been a constant phenomenon for the last 2000 years. In the year 1913, Albert von Leeuwenhoek, as part of a German expedition team, visited the Kizil cave. There, the German archaeologist was stunned by the great beauty of the Buddhist murals decorating the walls. The archaeologist was surprised by the lack of any East Asian influence in the paintings. Von Leeuwenhoek famously said, and I quote, "Despite its geographic proximity to China, the Buddhist art preserved in the Kizil grottos showed a perplexing lack of Chinese elements, displaying instead more Indian and Persian influence." It was in the 12th century, during the rule of the Northern Song dynasty, that Islam was introduced into the Xinjiang region from Central Asia. From 15th to the 16th century, Islam grew rapidly in Xinjiang, in much the same way it grew in Kashmir. By the end of the 17th century, Islam became the main religion of Xinjiang, Kazakhstan and Tajikistan. Was Xinjiang part of ancient China? Well, the name Xinjiang itself translates to new territory in Chinese. This vast region, about half the size of India, was first conquered by China only in the middle of the 18th century. Around the same time, the British took Bengal, their first conquest in India. Xinjiang was very much a part of ancient India. Its culture and tradition have since disappeared, much like what has become of Kashmir and Afghanistan. One can fathom the civilizational presence of India from the fact that Kumarajiva, after learning Buddhist scriptures in Kashmir, also a center of Shaiva philosophy, studied the 4 Vedas, the 5 sciences, Shastras and astronomy in Kashgar, and this is the same territory that China today claims to be historically the part of the great Chinese civilization. In western Tibet lies a mountain which no human in recorded history has climbed so far. At an elevation of 6,656 meters above sea level, Mount Kailash is not a high mountain, but legend claims that only Milarepa, a Buddhist monk, has set foot on its peak. For ages, it has been worshipped as a famous sacred site by countless people of Buddhism, Hinduism and Jainism. Hinduism believes that the mountain is the residence of Shiva and the center of the world, while Jainism believes that the mountain is the place where its ancestor, Rishabhanatha, attained the path to salvation. Tibetan Buddhism believes that this mountain is the residence of Kakra Samvara, representing boundless happiness. While the Tibetan script does not resemble Mandarin in any way whatsoever, it has a lot of similarities with the Indic script. True, many parts of Tibet were earlier not parts of India, but they were in themselves India. Here's one way to look at it. Nepal was never a part of India, but it is in a way more Indian than the India we see. In 1913, the 13th Dalai Lama, Tibet's political and spiritual leader, issued a proclamation which reaffirmed Tibet's independence, stating we are a small, religious and independent nation. The country had its own national flag, currency, stamps, passports and army. They signed international treaties and maintained diplomatic relations with neighboring countries. But in 1950, the newly established communist regime in China invaded Tibet, which was rich in natural resources and had a strategically important border with India. Tibet today is under Chinese occupation. The Chinese government justifies its occupation by claiming that Tibet has been a part of China for around 800 years, a claim which is not supported by facts. With 40,000 Chinese troops in the tiny landlocked country, the Tibetan government was forced to sign the 17-point agreement, which recognized China's rule in return for promises to protect Tibet's political system and Tibetan Buddhism. But for the CCP, promises are meant to be broken. The official language of Tibet today is Chinese, with many Tibetan children losing their ability to speak and write Tibetan. Resistance to China's rule is met with repression and brutality. As for the right to follow Tibetan Buddhism freely, monasteries are subject to monitoring and control by the Communist Party. And monks and nuns are feared and often persecuted by the Chinese regime. Any Tibetan possessing an image of the Dalai Lama risks imprisonment. In 1965, historian R.C. Majumdar, while highlighting China's inherent imperialistic nature, wrote, and I quote, "Thanks to the systematic recording of historical facts by the Chinese themselves, an almost unique achievement in Oriental countries, we are in a position to follow the imperial and aggressive policy of China from the 3rd century BC to the present day, a period of more than 2,200 years. It is characteristic of China that if a region once acknowledged her nominal authority, even for a short period, she would regard it as part of her empire forever and would automatically revive her claim over it even after 1,000 years, whenever there was a chance of enforcing it." China has border disputes with 18 countries that surround China from all sides. From India to Japan to the Philippines, China has on several occasions been subjected to criticism by the international community over its expansionist policies. The time has now come for India and the world to start questioning China's forcible occupation of Tibet, Xinjiang and Inner Mongolia, and most importantly, give Taiwan a diplomatic high five.